Okay, so this one is asking us to find the domain of the function and then what is the least value of x in the domain, which I think they're just being lazy with their programming rather so they asked in kind of a silly way and just ask you what's the lowest value of the domain. So let me show you the domain and then how to identify the lowest value. So if remember back in chapter 1, I think, when we were looking at domain and functions, it might have been, I think it was chapter 1. But anyhow, when we have a root with some math under it, what we do is we set the math greater than or equal to 0. And that's going to be the domain for a positive root. And that's because, remember, we can't take roots of negative numbers or even roots of negative numbers. So what we need to do is figure out essentially where this function right here is greater than or equal to 0. And to do that, there's a few different ways. Any of them we'd want to start by factoring. So we'll factor in x out front, x squared minus 49 greater than or equal to 0, and then that's the difference of squares, so that's going to be x plus 7, and x minus 7 greater than or equal to 0. So we have zeros at 0, negative 7, and 7, and now we have to figure out where this thing is greater than and where it is less than so that we can identify the greater than regions. So what I would do, we could do a sign chart, but I think that's overkill. I would just make like a quick sketch of this thing. So we'll call this one negative 7, and we'll call this one 7, and then there's 0. This is an x cubed, and it's positive, so remember x cubed positive kind of looks like that from the earlier section. I think it was 4.1 maybe. So this will come up and cross on the 7. It's going to come back and cross on the 0, and then it's going to cross on the 7 again and look like that. And so remember what we're trying to solve is where is this greater than or equal to 0? So it's going to be greater than or equal to 0 between negative 7 and 0, including those endpoints, because that all these are positive, and then it goes negative for a second, and then it's 0 again, and then all of this out here is positive because this just gets bigger and bigger. So my domain would be from negative 7, bracket, negative 7 to 0, union 7 to infinity. And that's the answer I wish they had asked for, but instead they asked for what is the least value, so for that, negative 7. But for these problems where it's a root, remember the stuff under the root has to be greater than 0, and that gets you kind of back to the topic of this section, which is solving polynomial and rational